Loading.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. It's encore. It's a 9-chord banger. Dr.
Peace to the community, the Purpose and Practice community. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm really excited about tonight's episode. Two educators that I hold very near and dear to my heart, and who I've been looking for. We've been trying to have this conversation now for like the last couple of weeks, and we are finally back for episode number 18. And tonight we have Jen Elgrim and we have Morgan Budnicki. And I'm going to get into, a brief introduction to them. But before we do that, I just want to, I hope everyone's doing well in these crazy times that we're living in. Everyone's healthy and everyone's moving about the way that they need to be moving about to navigate these crazy times. Here at Purpose and Practice, what we're dedicated to doing is bringing to you, the stories of individuals who are out doing great work. And a couple of months ago, I had the idea of showcasing educators because I feel like we're in a time where many educators are taking a lot of hits, whether it's in the media or these perceptions of educators not, living up to the things that they need to be doing. And I felt the need. I was like, you know what, to fill that void and to make sure that the right story is being told, I'm going to start showcasing a couple times a month educators. And tonight is a special night because I get to bring forth educators who, like I said before, I hold in very high esteem. And I met very, very early in my leadership, career. And I've learned so much from them. And tonight, I'm looking forward to both of them, sharing, some of our memories together. And then some of the things that inspired and moved them to be the educators who they grew to be. And they're both English teachers. So, as a former English teacher myself, I always enjoy, stopping in their class. There was probably a little over a month ago, I interviewed and we had on the show Mr. Morrison and Ken Morrison. And when I tell you, like, I had like on the Leadership Academy, this shout out to Long Branch High School, Leadership Academy. There was like this one hall, that I was a principal in, like the leader of. But when I tell you the teachers down this one lane and this one hallway were like fire. And, these two ladies here tonight that we have with us, these educators were two of those teachers. And Ken Morrison was another one. He was in that same hall too. So, and shout out to Miss Gervolino, because Miss Gervolino been like, when is this episode going to happen? When is this episode going to happen? And she was really though, she was in that hall too. And she was down at the other end, she worked with another person who's very near and dear to me, Miss Charmella, who I haven't seen in years, and I hope that she's well. But she worked on the other end, of that hall. But when I tell you, the ladies we have tonight, they really brought, when you start, like as leaders, and I'm just going to go on my soapbox just for a little bit, right? Leaders, educational leaders out there, any leader, especially education, don't take yourself too serious. Okay. And here's what I mean by that. We have a very, very important role as educational leaders, but please always remember the staff, the teaching staff, counseling staff, support staff in terms of professional development, safe school people, secretaries. At the end of the day, custodians, if you don't have them following you as the leader, okay, don't expect success. And it is our job as leaders, to me, to create the opportunity for them to do the magic that they're going to do, whether it's in the classroom, whether it's in the hallways, whether it's making sure your office is run correctly, and making sure your school is safe. Those are the things that, we need to happen that make the everyday experiences of our children great. So I just wanted to put that out there. And this is a perfect example of me kind of like, listen, what do y'all need to be successful? So with that said, we have Jen Elgrim and we have Miss Budnicki, Morgan Budnicki, who, we're very happy to have y'all both. How are y'all feeling, man? We'll start with you, Jen. How you feeling, Jen?
Everything's good. Everything's good. I mean, it's been a long, I don't know, how long has it been? 8 months that we've been dealing with this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's, there's times where it's been brutal. I mean, I'm glad that I saw my son for Christmas because I haven't seen him since. He lives down in Mississippi. So that's a little tough, not being able to see him, not seeing my dad who lives in Florida. Just trying to embrace the new normal.
Yeah. Which it's not, that's Matt, right? Was it Matt?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and it's funny because I remember Matt was at Middletown South, during
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Yes,
so he's down in Mississippi now?
He lives in South Haven, Mississippi, and he works in Memphis, Tennessee. He's very close to the border. Wow. And he's the IT supervisor for Goodwill Incorporated.
Wow.
So he goes to all the Goodwill stores and he does all their IT support, and he's loving life.
That's cool, man.
He's doing well. He's been down there almost 5 years.
Yeah, he's been down. I remember when he first went down there.
Right.
Yeah. Southern boy.
That's awesome.
Yes, he is.
So does he have like the whole Southern like dialect, and like is he?
No,
not yet.
The only thing he's got is like the big beard. The big beard.
Okay.
But he had that up here, but it's just gotten more pronounced.
See the English teacher more pronounced.
It's not, It's not my favorite. It's not my favorite, but
I could tell. The way you said, more pronounced. Because I only said something different when she's with him. Like, cut it. But I'm very happy to hear that. And I remember because, during that time, we were always competing with Middletown South in terms of football. And he was a football player, and that was always like this rivalry. It was, so I always remember hearing you telling stories about him, in some of your students. Yes.
Yeah, he knew all the guys, all the Long Range guys, so there was a really great friendship there,
Exactly.
Yeah. And Sarah was right in there too. She was, supporting all of them as well. So
that's right. Shout out to Matt. Shout out to Sarah. Because we always got to, give credit to where credit is due. And, those are the people, because as educators, it's like we have our kids and then we have our school kids, and when those worlds mesh and meet, it's like a beautiful thing, it really is. It really is. So definitely shout out to Sarah and Matt. Morgan, how you feeling?
I'm doing pretty good. I mean, with everything going on, it was kind of crazy because, I got the triplets, and now I have had the baby in November, and then coronavirus came. Yes. And it has just been crazy. So, bringing a new baby into this world with all this, all this going on and how tumultuous it is, it has been a little crazy, but we're adjusting, and, like you said, it's this new normal, and, it's just adjusting to it, like anything else. And I guess we're kind of used to doing that as educators. We were always adjusting, right? So yeah, adjusting to this new life. But all in all, we're doing really well. We're down here. We're like 20 minutes away from Myrtle Beach. So we're in South Carolina, and just loving the Southern life.
That's what's.
And
Now, how long
didn't you
you
just
been there?
move? You
Yeah, I was
just
gonna say how
moved.
long.
We just moved.
That's right.
So when we had Franny, my baby, we just didn't have a big enough house. She was like living in like the office. That's why I'm like hiding upstairs, by the way, because there's a million kids in there. So that's why I'm like in this hidden room. But anyway, and she was like, there was like no closet, there was no door, nothing for her. So we just moved into a house that could like fit us all. And like, hopefully my mom sees this, because we want my mom to move down here.
Oh, is mom in Jersey? Is mom in Jersey?
Mom's in Jersey, yeah.
Okay.
So she's in Jersey, and it's been hard, like you said, Grim, about not being able to see your family. It's been hard too. Like since the baby's been born, I have family that they haven't seen her. I haven't seen them. My sister is pregnant. She had a baby shower last weekend, and I attended virtually. Like I was literally on FaceTime the whole time. So you adjust, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
it's tough, So
yeah, it is.
On many different levels, So, but I mean,
so Morgan, how long have you been in Carolina?
This is going to be my 4th year teaching here. So, a little over 3 years, 3.5 years, something like that. And I actually got the job when I was still living in New Jersey. So I went on the phone, I interviewed on the phone, and then when we came down here with the first round of stuff, I came in for an interview the next day. We had like a 17-hour trip with the U-Haul. You remember this, Grim? I don't know if you remember this.
Yes, I do.
The next morning I had the interview at like 8 a.m. and I ended up getting the job, and it was just like meant to be. Everything kind of, and that started making me realize like things really, well, I always kind of knew things happen for a reason, but it was just like one more reminder in life that things happen for a reason. Do you know what I mean?
True.
And it just was, it just seemed right. And so I've been here ever since. And I have to say, like, I work in an amazing place with amazing people. And I'm really lucky. I mean, I've always been lucky, and I just kind of stepped into some more luck, moving here and, going from one good place to another. I mean, I couldn't imagine it. Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
Yeah.
That's what's up. So this is probably going to be, and I'm just putting it out there to anyone who's watching or anyone who goes and watches the replay. This is probably going to be really, really, really conversational, because that's just the kind of relationship that the three of us have. So there's not going to be a lot of formality to this. But with that said, I do want to go back, and because a lot of what we do here at Purpose and Practice is we kind of want to find out the background stories of like, okay, before you became an educator, like what were you like, before that, and what was growing up like. So we like to go back and hear those stories, from our guests. So I'm gonna put it out there. I don't know who wants to go first and kind of giving us a little bit about the early years. I don't know, Morgan, if you want to go first and you want to give Grim some time to think, or if you, whatever. However you want to do it.
I mean, I honestly, I don't mind at all. So, I mean, just growing up in general, I mean, just like generally speaking, I grew up from a single mother, and, I never knew my father growing up, and I didn't meet him until I was like a teenager, or my family on his side for a long time. So it was me, my mom. I was the oldest, my brother, my sister, and we were very close. I took care of them growing up. And, my mom was my strength. My mom was the person that guided me, and I always was so lucky to have her. As poor as we were at times, and as struggling as we were at times, I always had my mom, and I don't take that for granted, because not everybody has that, growing up. But pretty much that's where it started. And we moved around a lot for a while, and we eventually settled in Lacey Township, New Jersey, in Ocean County. And that's where I grew up, like throughout high school and everything. And I remember I had an English teacher, and she just kind of spoke to me. She made me love literature. But besides the fact of her making me love literature, what I loved about her is that she made me feel comfortable. You know, from a kid that moved around a lot, from a kid that never really felt comfortable, I felt comfortable in her room. I felt comfortable with her. And I think that really resonated with me like a lot more than I realized it at the time. And it really did stick with me. And I knew eventually, I didn't know right away I was going to be a teacher. I went into school for forensic psychology, and I knew it was going to be one day, but I didn't know it was going to be as quick as it was. And I just fell in love with the profession. You know what I mean? But yeah, so that's just like a little quick history of me. But
so let me ask this question, and I could be totally off, but I remember interviewing with you, and I could be off, but was there like, did you have a goal of maybe being a police officer at one point, or were you?
Yeah, I went for forensic psychology at John Jay University. So I wanted to be like a jury selector initially. And that's a really hard job to get. And so that was actually my major, was forensic psychology. Yeah. And I was definitely into that field. But I knew I wanted to be, help the public in some way. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny, like sometimes the things that we remember, and, before we get to you, Grim, a big part of me like saying like, you know what, I want to do a podcast is because I've been fortunate enough now for about 14 years to interview teachers. And sometimes in interviewing them, I hear these fascinating stories. And I'm like, wow. And I'm like, imagine like just having a life of just interviewing people, like how cool that is, because there's a lot of things that, I was talking to a teacher this morning from my own district, and we did a podcast, and he was like, wow, I never talked for an hour about some of these things that we talked about. And it was pretty cool, so I always have these like memories of like interviews and talking to teachers, and I'm like, I'm going to get that out there. So that's why I was like, I knew it was something with law enforcement or something like that. Yes. So Grim.
Yes. Let's see.
Those early years.
Where do I begin? Yeah. Now, I grew up in Fairhaven, which is right around the corner. I went to Rumson Fairhaven for 2 years. Then my dad was transferred, and we all moved to the suburbs of Pittsburgh, which the family did not appreciate all that much. Being someone who loves the ocean and the beach and just that lifestyle, it was kind of hard to get used to. But I think it helped me adjust, and it helped me, I don't know, hone in on some of the strategies that I don't think I really knew I had to get to know people. And, because I did 2 years at Rumson, and I'm leaving at the end of my sophomore year. You're like, what, 15 years old? To me, my life was over when my father said we're moving. So after I graduated from high school outside of Pittsburgh, we moved back to Fairhaven because family was miserable. But unbeknownst to me, my parents were having marital issues. I really wasn't paying too much attention to that, but I know that now. And then I went off to college and knew I wanted to be a teacher. I always knew I wanted to be a teacher. And I think it's because my grandmother was a teacher, and I used to spend a lot of time with her, and she used to tell me her stories and show me her books and show me her lessons. And I adored her. This is my father's mom, who lived down in Florida, and I would go down and spend time with them for spring break. I think I was the only college student who didn't do spring break. I would hang out with my grandparents. And so, I went to college and learned that I had some skills in working with children with disabilities. And I did some extensive training with autistic and emotionally disturbed kids. Ended up getting a job where I did my student teaching down in Camden. Stayed down there for a couple of years. Worked with autistic kids. Wow. Loved it. And then realized that private school was really not where I needed to stay if I wanted to make a little more money, just a little. So yeah, Gary and I got married, and I kept the job down in Camden and commuted. We had a condo in Freehold, so I was driving from Freehold down to Camden. And then I realized, you know what, I got to get closer. So I had all these resumes out, and Long Branch was one of the only interviews I had. And it was with George Catronbone and
Cat.
yeah, and Mr. Selly. Yes, wow. My original placement was supposed to be the middle school back in 1988. But they ended up.
You would have had me, Grim.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I'm leaving now.
Yes. Where did they put you? Where did you go?
Okay, so I ended up going to the Garfield School with Mr. Mantley. So I was there with Mr. Mantley. But I did have, at the Garfield School, I did have 6'9".
Wow.
Yeah. And it's great that, you know, I work with him now at the high school.
Yes.
So, you know, and that's where it all started. In 88, I was at the Garfield School.
Wow. So hold on. Like,
yes.
So you're telling me you could have been my English teacher. Listen, no disrespect to my English teacher that I had when I was in 7th and 8th grade, but it could have been you.
Well, our paths were not meant to cross at that point.
So, all right, I'm intrigued right now because,
like Bud said, everything happens for a reason. It wasn't meant to happen at that point.
Yes. And you put out you put out all of these resumes.
Yes.
Long Branch calls you, Mr. Selly, who actually my first real interview, you know, as an educator was with Mr. Selly. You know, at the middle school. He was at the middle school at the time. And he was like my middle school principal. Well, actually, Mr. Farina was my middle school principal. Mr. Selly was a vice principal at the time.
Yes.
So it's just like when you just said that, you know, and then it was 1988 was your first year teaching?
Yes.
Wow. And you went to Gregory?
No, I went to Garfield.
Garfield, not Gregory.
Yeah.
Garfield. That's
which
right.
is now
Garfield.
Which is now the Audrey Clark.
Is it the Audrey Clark?
Yes.
Yes.
Wow. It's the alternative. Man. Yeah.
So like it's, you know, the history is just it's just amazing.
See, and when I was at Garfield, I was co-teaching and working with Janet Dudek.
Wow.
Bob Clark. Yeah. Gary Penta was the gym teacher.
Wow.
Oh, there was a good bunch there. Wow. And Mr. Mantley. I adored Mr. Mantley.
Yeah, Mr. Mantley.
He was classy. He was a classy person.
That's a great way to describe Mr. Mantley. Mr. Mantley was, and sorry, Bud, but we're like doing like this old Long Branch history. But we were when I was in Leonard Conrail School, Mr. Mantley was our principal. He was my principal when I was like maybe 2nd and 3rd grade, and we were so afraid of him. But he was our principal, and he lived in the community. He lived on Fifth Avenue. I'll never forget. He had a brown house on Fifth Avenue, and we used to walk down the house and then pretend to throw rocks at it because he was the principal, you know, all of that nonsense that 4th graders do and 5th graders do. But it also, we got to the point where it felt good to be able to see, you know, and those of you who don't know Mr. Mantley was African-American male principal, and we're talking about what, you just said 1988.
Yeah.
And he was my principal, at Leonard Conroe. And, I'll never forget, him. He was the first Black principal that I ever knew about, when I was that age. So, and he was a great, and rest in peace to Mr. Manley. He left us not too long ago. It wasn't too long ago that he left us.
I used to see him at all the football games. He went to all the football games.
Yes.
Yeah, I used to see him.
Yep. Great guy, and
yes.
And I remember having a conversation. He came to my grandmother's funeral when my grandmother passed away, back in 2006, 2007. And I had a conversation with him then, and I didn't even know he knew my grandmother, and we talked. And that was like the last time that I remember speaking with him, and unfortunately, but he did so much. He did so much in our community. So thank you for sharing, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I started off the show by saying, listen, these educators that we have here tonight are educators who make differences in the lives of children. And what I want to kind of talk about is, and I want to go back to a time, like I said, I was a young administrator when I first met both of you. And, I had the opportunity to work, and serve, Mr. Freeman. And, definitely a shout out to Mr. Freeman, who mentored me and showed me the ropes. He showed me so much, as a young administrator, as a young man. And he was like raving over, at the time, Elgrim. And he was like, wait until we get Elgrim here. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, And I was like, all right, who is this Elgrim? Who is this person? And because he had a vision for the high school at the time, and he really was like, all we need is really to get some folks in here who are going to develop relationships with these young people, and we're going to turn this thing around. That was like that's where he was coming at. And then, Budnicki pops up, and it was like, wow, she's one, and it just kind of changed things. It started turning things around. So what I would like to do is spend a little bit of time with both of you talking about what drove you to be the educators that you are. And I feel like you knew your content, you could teach with the best of them, but that relationship piece seemed to be something that you all had, both of you had. So Morgan, do you mind just kind of talking about what that means to you, what that part of teaching means to you in terms of developing relationships, and then we'll get to you, Grim, on that same topic.
Yeah, well, that's what they don't teach in school. That's something that, like we were talking before, either you have it or you don't, and it's that leading and that teaching with your heart and that empathy and learning from your mistakes and learning that it's not just about the content that you teach. Yes, that's really important. But when you're faced with kids every day and you can see the needs of those kids every single day, it changes you. I think that it changes you. I think that working at Long Range, it changed me, and it made me a much more empathetic person all around. Not just a teacher. Do you know what I mean? I was able to put myself in the shoes. You helped me do that. And I'll never forget, I'm going to share a memory. Not mine.
Go for it.
I didn't realize something that this small would make a big difference. But it was one of the first times that you had come as my principal and you had observed me. And I was doing a lesson on irony, and I'll never forget this because it was one of these things where I had to stop and take a look back and really reflect. And what happened was I had this beautiful lesson, I remember, and I had everything. I had my anticipatory set, I had my do now, I had everything. And I remember, you probably don't remember this, but I remember I had a clip from Seinfeld or something about irony. All right. And I thought that I just kind of hit it out of the park. And when we went over observation, you were like, it didn't speak to these kids. It didn't speak to them. And what do you mean? Like, I wasn't understanding that. I'm thinking about like teaching my content and teaching, like I'm trying to get through irony. And I was like, no,
Yes.
this beautifully demonstrated irony in my mind. And it didn't resonate with me at first. It took me time to digest what you were telling me, because I was so caught up in the fact that I had put the time and the effort in the lesson itself, and I wasn't hearing at first what you were saying to me, if that makes sense.
No, it does. It does.
Yeah, and at the time I was like, you were like, it's not resonating with these kids, like it's going over their head. And I was like, what do you mean? This is a perfect example. And do you remember this at all?
I do remember it. Yes, I do remember it. I do.
First, because it was a funny clip, right, with George and how he's bald, and it was ironic because he wouldn't date the girl that was bald. And I remember thinking, but wait, I hit all my standards and I had everything. But you're so right. And in that moment, I didn't realize it. It took me a while, and I can't tell you how long exactly it was, but that was one small but like pivotal moment where I was like, wait a minute. At some point, I was like, this guy is right. Like in my head, I was like, it doesn't matter. Like, yes, I hit my learning target, and yes, I had this beautiful lesson plan. But if the kids don't get it and it doesn't speak to them, what good is it?
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? And that started the ball, I think, kind of rolling for me, and me thinking in a different direction. Like, it's not, yes, it's about teaching and it's your content and it's your lesson, but it's also about that there's that other whole gray area. Do you know what I mean? There's that part of being a teacher that, it's hard to even put into words. It's that empathy part. It's that loving, it's that lovingness, it's that caringness. And it goes beyond, you know what I mean? It goes beyond what you actually, like I said, setting up that lesson perfectly or whatever. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of it, because I remember that, and I remember chewing on it for a while, and then it just kind of hit me, and I was like, you know what? Like, he's right. Like, he's right. And that started for me.
You know, it's funny, Morgan, that you share that story, because I think that a lot of times what happens is that we're not always open to feedback.
That's right.
I just think, like we're not always open to it. And I think that's one of, when it comes to us as like educators, we sometimes miss the boat with that in terms of being open to feedback.
Yeah.
And because you could have gone two directions there.
Yep.
You could have been like, listen, who is, like you said, who is this guy? Like, are you serious? This was perfect. Or you can be like, well, let me reflect on that, and maybe I can improve. And the fact that you were open to that feedback, it probably, in looking back, and I didn't know you were going through that with this whole situation, like, oh my God, I'm struggling, but it's like, I think that it opened up probably a relationship that we had, that it was like, all right, now there's room to grow. And
that's right.
we all grew, we all grew from it. So I do remember that, though. I do remember that.
And that was just the beginning. And I remember after that, us having a lot of very candid
conversations. Yes.
And things like that. And I could talk to you about things that were going on in the classroom, but things that were going on with my students outside of the classroom. And I knew and I don't know exactly when I knew it, but I knew that it was a safe place for me to talk to you. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And even with Grim, because Grim and I, we would talk all the time about our students, and academically, but emotionally as well. You know what I mean? And we just kind of had, and I think that's kind of also speaks to what you're talking about before with like the hallway. We kind of had this thing going on in our hall where we knew we were there to teach, and we were doing our job, and we were teaching, but we were there for something else too. You know what I mean? We were there for a bigger purpose, and we all kind of connected, and it was kind of like a little bit of magic. You know what I mean? Because it was safe for us as educators to go to you. There was one point where I was like, okay, it's safe to go to him. It's good. I can talk to him. Yes. And then the kids felt safe with us.
Yes.
So it kind of had that like trickle down, I think, effect that we all kind of felt. But I remember it wasn't immediate, but I remember when I got it. And then when I got it, the ball just started rolling. You know what I mean?
So powerful. And the part that you said about kids, when the kids it's just like at home. When the kids know mom and dad are on the same page, it changes the whole dynamic. And it's funny because, and then I go to Elgrim because you were a newer teacher, Bud, and Elgrim was like right across the hall from you. So, and she was a veteran, and she had experience. And Grim, could you just, like words can't even express the magic that you brought to the floor at that point. And I'm speaking from the time that I was there, but you were it was magical what you did with staff and what you did with young people. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that? Like how did you know, like, this is my purpose? It's not all about Romeo and Juliet or a persuasive essay. Yeah, I can teach that.
Well,
but
this is where I have to give a major shout out to Dr. Freeman, because when I was at the middle school, he started the mentoring program for 8th graders, at-risk 8th graders. He had this great idea, and he was a brand new administrator. And that was back in the old middle school when there was the red house, the yellow house, the green house.
Yes.
So I was like, okay, yeah, I'll give it a shot. And, there was a particular student who, kind of put himself out there and said, I want you. And it made me kind of look inward and say, why? Like you may not even like me next year. He was only in 7th grade. And sure enough, it started that 8th grade year. And or Dr. Freeman, he kind of said, take this mentoring thing and run with it. Make it your own. Do whatever you need to do. Make a difference. And I did. I took it and I made it my own. And I embraced these kids and I worked with them inside school, outside school, opened up my home, opened up my family, a lot of it. And I felt that it was pushing me to something I didn't think I'd ever be able to do as an educator. It made me more passionate. It made me love my job. I knew I was, helping and guiding and supporting, but helping them to make better choices and do right things. And, and I was being my true self. I was being honest and real. And they knew that. Because these kids will tell you flat out when you're not being real. They will also, they will tell you, they know it, which is why some of them can identify the teachers they don't like. And the first thing they tell you is, that they don't like how they're being treated or, and I have such a relationship with some of the kids that I can be as honest as I need to be to get my point across, and they trust me.
Yes.
And it's mutual respect.
Yes.
And so I wasn't done at the middle school. So when I came to the high school, I felt like my purpose was bigger because now it was like adult decisions because they were older. And you gave me carte blanche to do whatever I needed to do. You pretty much let me go. And I remember when I was a little leery about, and Bud will remember this, about doing the novel Push. So, and I knew it was so relevant and meaningful to our population. And I had done The Bluest Eye the year before with these kids. So I figured I can make such a comparison here. This is like a literary moment. And I remember you absolutely said, go with it, run with it, show the movie, do what you have to do. And it's tough stuff to teach.
Definitely.
it's brutal conversation because you
Mhm.
came in the
Mhm.
classroom
Mhm.
when some of these kids were doing some of the projects we did after we'd finished the movie and the novel. And I was so proud of the kids because whenever I can sit back and I don't have to do any talking and they can
They're
do
doing
it,
it. Yes. Yes.
that's a win-win right there. Right there.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Like that. It's funny
that's it.
because Push came up with Mr. Morrison too. Kenny brought Push up.
Yeah, I was watching
Yeah.
it. I was
Yeah.
watching it. Yeah.
He brought Push up. And it's, here's what I'll say. And I started off the conversation by saying that leaders, if there's a certain direction you want your staff to go in or to take, you have to be willing to take that same direction. And if you're not, then you can't expect, if you all about relationships and you don't have relationships with your staff, then your staff ain't gonna have relationships with kids. Like you'll have those few who this is just what we do, but then you're gonna miss the boat on so many, on kind of like teaching the importance of those relationships to other teachers who may not be relationship driven. So it's funny that you all said that because that was a lot of what we were trying to do. And you both mentioned Dr. Freeman, and I couldn't listen. There's no words that I can express into how important he was in terms of my development, as a man and as a leader. And one of the things that he used to always say is that, listen, it's all about developing relationships. But then he also proved it. He also proved it in terms of the relationships that I was able to see that he developed with staff. And, like you just said, Elgrim, you were one of the ones that he just always was like, listen, you wait until you see. So that was like the nature. And that's what our kids wanted. And when our kids saw that we were all on that same page, it was like, when I tell you, it was like, not that it was easy because it was never easy, but it was like, we knew if some of those students were upset with me because I had to hold them accountable for something, they would come to Budnicki, they would come to Elgrim, they would be like, oh, I'm mad at Dr. Mr. Rawls at the time or whatever. And then, but it created like almost like this bubble, where we were all in it together and you were able to coach them back up to saying, well, did you ever look at it this way or that way? And that's what that created. So I really appreciate you all sharing those stories because that's like big, that it's big stuff. It's
a couple times the two of us. Do you remember this, Grim? We would have a kid in our room, or it was usually in your room, but sometimes in my room. And depending on if it was your student or my student, we would just kind of huddle in that room, and whatever that kid needed to get off their chest or talk about or whatever. I mean, it would be all the time. I felt not all the time, but it was very often. You know what I mean? Where it was like they knew the safe spaces to go to. Just like we knew, like what was safe for us to go to, you know what I mean? And so I remember many times we'd have a kid in there, and and that kid would feel safe because felt like it was okay, an okay space, Yes.
And then you all feeling that, that it was safe. It was safe to do that because that's another big part of it.
But that's because that's how you made us feel.
Yeah.
Right. We felt like we had the freedom to do what we needed to do to handle whatever was put in front of us.
Yes. And kids, and it's because I really believe, and there's a lot of stuff going on you see on social media that you have to Maslow before you bloom, and that relationships have to be formed before you can get into all of those higher order discussions and things of that nature. And when I think of you, like I think about that hallway, I think about, here's what I always remember: your rooms never being empty. Okay.
Never.
Like prep, lunch,
never.
It was never empty. It was in without naming, I can name students.
It's still not.
Is it still? I can only imagine. Well, now you're in the virtual.
Now it has to be, but
but it was like, you know, when I would walk down a hallway, and it took me time to get to the point of like, okay, kids should be at lunch, you know, because I was a young leader. So I'm thinking everything's got to fit into these boxes, you know? And that's why I said, when I talk about Dr. Freeman, it's like, listen, like, that's where the work is happening, you know? So that 7th period, that kid's not on the 3rd floor running around and doing whatever. He needs to be able to go there to lunch and be able to know he has a connection, and that connection is going to keep him in class in 7th period. And it's like, you know, as a young leader, it was like, I had to learn that, you know, but I always remember that. And that's where I learned to value that, you know, like, I was like, their classes are never, ever empty. Like, I just think of both of you of like walking down a hall, it's lunch. And whether it was the time, Bud, where you had a half and half class. I think you may have gotten vocational kids into your class on one, right? Yeah. So you had that, but then it's not like you were trying to run out of there having your half lunch. It was like kids were in there all period.
Yeah.
You know, go ahead. What like, talk about that, you know, because I just think people need to hear those stories, you know, of why you did that, and then the magic that happened in those spaces.
Well, I think kids are going to test you. I think our kids, they tested us, right, Grim? Like, it wasn't automatic. It was, they would test you a little bit and feel you out and see, you know, what your response was, and sometimes throw you a curveball, right, and see how you're going to respond to that. And they kind of based it off of your responses, and it would just kind of grow into something. They knew that we're not going to judge you, and you can talk to us, and you can show us your emotions. And I don't know exactly how it started. I know I probably saw what was going on in Grimm's room. Do you know what I mean? She kind of, I think, to the way, because I was like, oh, okay, well, I see what she's doing and the impact that she's making. And I want to do the same thing. And I want people to know that it's okay. So she kind of just being right across the hall and seeing that she had these kids coming to her and how they trusted her. And I looked up to you so much for that. And it really got like the ball rolling with me with that, and making me think, just like I had those moments with you, I had those moments with her too, where I would look across the hall and think, oh, okay, that's what I want to be. You know what I mean? That's what I want. I want a relationship. You know, I want those kids to remember me like they had remembered you and came back year after year to come visit you. And so that was really big for me too.
That's powerful. That's powerful. That
And then they were smart and made us an in-class support team.
It is.
I don't think I was there for that. I don't think I was there. Was that after me?
It might have been.
Were you not there?
I don't think so.
I
think I missed that. I think I missed that. Yeah. I don't think I was there for that. I just think that, you know, educators, we make, especially teachers, I won't even say we, as an administrator, teachers make 1 million decisions a day, millions of decisions a day. And the pressure of those decisions, we don't think about as, you know, teachers, but those are really huge decisions. And the grace that you both were able to like kind of go in and do the things that you did, and have the ability to be like, all right, this is what they need, and here's how I'm going to provide it. Because another thing that both of you did, and you may not recall, but you advocated for young people. And when I say advocate, you obviously advocated, but you would come to me and you would, or go to Dr. Freeman and say, hey, let's try this, or I think kids need this, or, you know, trust me on this, you know. And it was like you were in tune to what it was our young people needed. And then it made a situation where, as a leader, I was able to say to young people when they came to me, did you talk to Ms. Budnicki? Did you talk to Ms. Elgrim? Like, and it was like, it gave another person and another perspective for them to kind of bounce off and understand community, you know. And that was like, to me, that was really important because I knew the only way we were going to do what we needed to do was to have a community and have a village, and it was one of those things. And you, both of you, you have no clue, how much, I owe to you during those years in terms of believing in the vision and supporting me, that way. And we haven't even gotten to parents, in terms of, because that's another, like real talk from you, Grim, like I'll always owe understanding. And I was a teacher. Yeah, I got it. But understanding the importance of parental relationships and kind of like on a whole different level, like a whole.
Well, it's one of those, again, it's that whole mutual respect. It's like put your money where your mouth is. If it's like with the kids, if you say something, you better follow through because they will call you out on it. And they're gonna remind you, you let me down. You told me you would be here. You told me you would do this. So I was always sure to follow through with every single thing I said to them, because the consistency was maybe something they didn't have in their life. Then you have to turn around and make a phone call home, and you have to make sure that that person that you're speaking to is going to be your, tag team person, because you got to go back and forth. And I don't know, it's some of it was magical. Some of the parent relationships, parent relationships I had was magical. I thank God every day that some of those parents shared their children with me the way they did.
Yes.
That takes a lot. That takes a lot. But they trusted me and I trusted them, and the relationship, it just builds from there. And once you have that parent, especially a difficult parent, you're good. You're golden.
Yes.
And once they know that you love their kid and that that's the thing. They need to know that you genuinely care about their kid. You want their kid to succeed. You love their kid. You know what I mean? And you're pushing for their kid on our end. You know what I mean? And once they buy into that and they realize that and they know that that's genuine and they feel it, then you have the parent support like that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Because you know the difference. And they can stop the difference.
If it's real, yes.
Yeah.
If it's fake.
Absolutely. And as a parent, you can too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So it's one of those things. You need them to buy in, but they could tell from you that you're genuine. You know what I mean? And that you want those kids to succeed and you love those kids. And that's where I think that mutual respect comes from. You know what I mean?
I 100% agree. And it's the difference. Like when I say that's the difference when parents can trust, all right, my kid's in good hands, changes every single thing.
Right.
What I want to, it's so much. And I always, this is like, I think this may be this is the second time I've had multiple guests on the show. Right. And I promised each of them, I said, all right, we're going to have your own separate episode. But there's some groups and some teams and tandems, however you want to describe it, that I feel like need to be introduced on the same episode. And I don't know why I had that feeling with you two, but I had that feeling. And I was like, do I just do it one-on-one, or do I, start off with like a group? And something told me like, start off as a group, because I realized how, like, even with Bud, when you were talking about, Grim was across and you were like, listen, I like the way that she moves and I want to move like that, so it makes me feel good that, all right, that was the right move, pulling them both, together on the same show. What I would like for, as we begin like to close, I want to talk about a time, maybe if each of you can share, if there was ever a time where you really like second guessed yourself. Or if you felt like, maybe this isn't the right way, or maybe, and you don't have to be specific, but was there ever a time where you were like, am I doing this the right way? But then you kind of got a sign like, no, this is what it is. Because I just know as an educator myself, like I said, we make a million decisions, and you can go to, and there's some nights we don't sleep based on decisions that we made, right? So, and you're thinking all night of like, oh, how am I going to make this right? Or was this the right thing to do? Have you ever had that point where you're like, oh my God, what did I do? Or how am I going to reclaim this relationship? Because it's important for people to know that this is not like a fairy tale where it's like everything is just always perfect because I have this relationship. But there's struggles also in tough love in those relationships.
I was just going to say that it's one of, as you well know, and I don't need to mention specifics, but there were a lot of situations where I questioned my decisions with specific kids and choices they had made, and I would have to dish out a little bit of tough love and maybe stop providing what they were used to getting, and maybe make them realize that their actions have consequences and reactions, because I don't think that some of them actually knew that, and they for some of them it was really hard for them to take responsibility for their behavior, and for some of them it was hard for them to come and have that tough conversation and say, I screwed up, I'm sorry. So there were many instances, too many to count, where I thought to myself, should I have done that? Should I have said that? Maybe this is the wrong way to handle this. I'm going to lose the kid forever. That kind of stuff. Like, you just never know. It's like a little slippery slope. And you kind of hope that, your bond with that particular kid is strong enough that they know that you're doing it from such a loving place, and that it means so much, and that you're only doing it because you care and love them and you want them to be successful,
Yes. And that is, I think you said it very well, Grim. But I don't know if you have anything on that. But I remember, and Bud, you can go after that, but I remember at some point we all were the bad guys. So there were some times where they were coming to you all like, Mr. Ross is bugging. What's going on? Why he all in his feelings? Why what he mad about? And then there was times where they came to me. I'm not talking to Bud. I'm not talking to Grim. And it's like, but that's why that village and community is so important. So how about you, Morgan? Did you ever have that situation where you're like, oh my God, maybe I made the wrong decision, or I got to stick with this tough love?
I have something a little different. Okay. And you might remember this student without saying the name, but there was this student, and Grim, you might remember this.
I remember him. Yes.
You might remember this particular person, because this girl, who, by the way, I still keep in contact with, but she at the time, came in, she had a lot of baggage. Okay. And she would come across very, I guess, mean, and would curse at you for no reason, and a lot of teachers would describe as, just mean, disrespectful, whatever the case would be. And I remember thinking about this girl, and I remember thinking, I think she was a junior, and I remember thinking in my head, for her to come in and have this weight on her, where she was mean all the time to everybody all day long, something is going on. And instead of me getting mad, writing her up, throwing her out of my room, whatever the case may be, I don't know if you remember, but I came and I talked to you about this student. And I remember saying to you, there's got to be something deeper. Do you know what I mean? Going on, because in the beginning I was like, what am I going to do with this kid? I offer her a pencil and she's cursing at me. You know what I mean? I don't want to kick her out of my room. I write her up and write her off. I feel like, I felt like that was writing her off. Yes. And I remember at that time, like, what do I do? I was kind of lost, and I came to you and I was like, what role do I play here? Do you know what I mean? But I remember having this conversation with you and just being like, this girl, something else obviously has gone on with her for her to be like this. And we talked about just kind of still being there. You can hold her to that standard, but that's not okay. But at the same time, letting her know that that's not going to push me away. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna kick you out. I'm not gonna kick you out of my room. And that's not, because that was her defense mechanism. That was her pushing me away. And I stuck with it. It was hard. It was hard for a little bit. It was tough. And, I doubted myself a lot with her, as well as other kids. But I just really remember her because, she was abrasive. And I stuck with her, and we developed this relationship where, and I had a lot of relationships with these great kids. But we developed this relationship where, again, she knew it was safe, and slowly but surely, the attitude, that defense, that wall that she put up, it dropped. You know what I mean? And we still follow each other on social media and things like that. And like I'm still rooting for her. Like, she's got this happy life. Do you know who I'm talking about? Do you remember?
I think I do. Yes.
And
I think I do.
It was a struggle. It was a real struggle. I remember being lost for a little bit as to how am I going to handle this. And we had this conversation, and I'm sure, Grim, I talked about her with you too. Because she would just be kicked out of every room and written up, and it wasn't working. So if that wasn't going to work, what are you going to do that's going to work? You know what I mean? And it was hard. I remember those moments of like, okay, it's going to go one way or the other. And eventually, it took almost all year, but the walls came down. You know what I mean? And we developed a relationship, and I'm still rooting for her. You know what I mean? And she has a great life, and I wanted her to feel safe and to be okay and put that wall down, but it took a lot of work.
And I think that just that, like, agreeing that it's something that I can do. And I feel like as good educators, that's what we always do. We're always like, okay, what's the answer? What's the answer? It's like figuring out a code. It's like cracking a code. Because it's easy to give up and say, well, you don't fit in. You're not doing what you need to do. See ya. I think, if when we have that feeling of like, I want to figure this out, like I want to, because what you just said, you were like, there's something else. Like, I don't like there's something else, because the easy thing is suspend a kid, kick the student out, and that's sometimes the easy go-to answer, but really saying, well, what is it going to take? Or what do I need to figure out this person? Or maybe rather than pushing them further away, I need to pull them closer. And that's not what you want to hear when you're the teacher coming in. Like, listen, I just want my class in order, dude. Like, I feel you with all of this relationship, but my class is out of control right now. And you can change that by suspending them. And I'm not saying that this is what you said, but sometimes the feeling is that, like, just make my life easier right now,
but half the battle with controlling the classroom is if you have great relationships with the kids that are in the class, then you're going to eliminate half the battles because you have the relationships, and the kids are going to be like your biggest fan. So,
totally. And that would be, as an administrator, that would be my difficult conversation with some teachers, is like, listen, like, let's not jump right to let's suspend this student. There's gotta be some other things we can try first, because once you do that, you have displaced any type of trust and responsibility that you have for making sure that student's successful. And that's how kids see it. When you say, oh, go to the principal, or you're going to be like, you're done. You will never get that back. As an educator, you never get that back. This is, and I knew it was going to be like this kind of conversation. I miss, I miss both of you so much. It's sometimes we take for granted the people that we can say good morning to every day, and the people that we can say, goodbye to every evening.
Right.
We can lose like, the gratitude for that. Like, I think that that's really, I'm like thinking like for like 5 years, we said good morning to each other. Like we,
Yeah.
we were in that grind together, of making sure, we were doing what we needed to do for young people and their families, and that's something that, I think, we should cherish more. I really do.
Yeah.
And both of you, I thank you because you came at great times in my career where I needed, folks like yourself. And I learned a lot from you, over the years that we worked together. So I definitely salute you. Before we close out, there is a question I always like to ask. And I like to ask if you can give advice, if you could, to like, if your younger self, what advice you would give your younger self. If you could share that with the audience, whoever wants to go first, have at it.
Mine is always, don't be so hard on yourself and don't care so much about what other people think. That was a hard one. That was a hard one for me to learn. And doing what I do with the kids that I work with taught me that. Because you can't care what other people think. You just got to go with it. And some people are going to get it and some people aren't.
Yes.
Exactly. But, my younger self, no, you couldn't have.
You wouldn't have. Wow. I like that. I like that. I like that. I definitely do. It's funny because the teacher I interviewed earlier this morning in district, he said something very similar to what you just said, Jen. Like, I like that. How about you, Bud?
Mine is to be able to admit when you're wrong and to be able to take a step back, because that took me a long time. You know what I mean? And going back to that observation that we had before, where I mentioned earlier, like that was one of the first stepping stones where I was like, wait a minute, I got to stop and pump the brakes here for a minute. Like, you know what I mean? And that really opened my eyes to like, not be so myopic. There's different avenues, there's different routes. And that's what I mean. I learned so much from both of you and during my time there, because I was only a second year teacher when I started there. You know what I mean? So you guys had, years and experience under your belt. And I got to say, like I said, I knew it was a safe place with you guys. I knew that you guys created this environment and this like climate that was safe. And I learned that from you guys. And I also learned that it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to step back for a minute and reflect and say, how could I have done this better or differently to serve my students? You know what I mean? Or at home to serve my family. What could I do better? And to stop and to reflect. And I remember I had an hour drive each way, and I would reflect the whole way home. You know what I mean? That was like my time where I would be in the car and I would be able to reflect about that day and what could I have done better to serve my students. And that was a really big piece. I know you were really big on reflection. And that really started me thinking like, it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to say, I could have done this better, or let me look at this from somebody else's angle. You know what I mean? And, my younger self definitely would have never, you know what I mean? So that would be my advice, would be to stop. And it's okay to be wrong. It's okay to start over. It's okay to take another route. You know what I mean? And to open yourself up to other people's viewpoints of things.
Listen, I love it. I need it tonight. I needed it. Like it was, because you know what? It was good. Like we needed this. We needed this. You know?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just, I equate it to, and I played football a lot of my life. And, there were some things that we would say, when we're in a huddle, there's some things that never leave the huddle. There's some things that happen on football field that other folks who weren't on the field at the time would never know. Just like if you were a cheerleading coach, and I know, Bud, you were a cheerleading coach, there's some things that never left that cheerleading circle, and with us, there's like these, it's almost like these stories that we have that we hold dear to ourselves and we all shared in, that we will always have forever.
Yeah.
You know, and that, yes. What did you say?
Yeah.
And they helped shape me and mold me. And
Yes.
really a lot of this credit goes to you guys, because you both took me. I was a second year teacher and you took me under your wing. Both of you, Grim did, you did. And I'm in debt to you guys, really, honestly, because you helped reshape my thinking of what it was meant to be a teacher. You know, they teach it in school. You gotta, you know, you have to have your standards and you have to have your do now, your participatory and all this. They don't teach you that whole other element.
Yes.
And I learned from you guys, you know what I mean? And I am indebted to you guys because I feel like my eyes were actually opened, you know what I mean, to what it means to be there for the kids, you know what I mean? So I want to thank you guys both. Well, I have you both on here because I don't see you guys that often, but thank you guys because really, seriously, it opened my eyes, you know, being across the hall from you and being able to come talk to you about kids that we had issues with, and we would come together. It just really awakened me. You know?
Well, that ties into the conversation we had before we went on air, that everything happens for a reason.
Yeah.
We were all meant to work together as a team.
True.
You know, we were all meant to have that little bit of time, that special time that we had, and make this, you know, magical change.
Magic. Because we have, like, and it's so many students who I've had on, like, some of our former students, and the stories that they tell about both of you, you know, like, and it's like that, but you're right. Like, that is the magic, you know, and that we'll have forever, you know. We'll be sitting around somewhere laughing and joking and thinking to ourselves, you know, and wondering, you know, I wonder how Budnicki's doing. I wonder how Elgrim's doing. I wonder, you know, like that, that's it, man. That it doesn't get any better than that. Like, at the end of the day, you know, and that's why I'm going to end this show the way I started it. We can't take ourselves too seriously. Like, pause and think about the greatness that we have in each other. Leaders, if you're out there, and I may have been you one point in my life, thinking results, and forgetting about process, and relationships. Don't lose sight of that, because the people who are bringing the vision to fruition, those people need to know that you love and believe in them. And if they don't feel that way, you're not making any magic happen. Trust me, you know, trust me. So this has been a great night for me. I'm glad that because I was like, oh my God, is the audio going to work? I was like, I text y'all. I was like, bring headphones just in case the audio doesn't work. Because you know, and I'm definitely going to be reaching out to both of you, because I really think that both of you deserve solo episodes. And I really want to dig deeper into some things that we talked about tonight, but giving you your own episode. So I would definitely be in touch for that. So
this was great. This was great.
Thank you so much. I agree.
Thank you so much.
Yes. And thank you all, you know, thank you all. So to the Purpose in Practice family, we thank you all for tuning in tonight. And, you know, as I had a chance to reconnect with educators that I will always remember on my path to education, because they've really influenced and they've helped me in my role as a leader in terms of fulfilling my vision. And I will always be grateful for that. I'll always be grateful for that. So thank you. And everyone, please take care of yourselves. Be safe with all of the craziness that we're living in this day and age. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. And, you know, I wish you all a good weekend. And we are out from the Purpose in Practice podcast. Out, Morgan signing out. Shout out to Long Branch. Shout out to the Leadership Academy, especially that old school Leadership Academy that we was all in. Salute. Peace out. I'll see y'all all later.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to Purpose in Practice. Hey, Yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp. Learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross, dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. It's encore.